Welcome to the Fearless Female Voices show and podcast, where we celebrate women of courage and resilience who have defied the odds stacked against them. By uncovering their story of strength and inspiration, we shed light on some of the social, economic, and cultural barriers that women face as challenges and how they are overcome. Women around the world listening, we want you to know that you are not alone and that your story and voice are important. So today we have a wonderful guest. We invite Kiran Kumar, who is the director of Roaring Ahead, training and empowerment organization aimed at empowering all women, regardless of color, class, creed, and culture. She is the founder and host of the You Are Not Invisible After 50 podcast and the founder of the SPF 50 Plus movement. Kiran, you come from an Indian background, and today we're going to touch on some of the cultural aspects of that and some of the challenges that you faced as a woman in that culture and in our society today. So yeah, it sounds like you have a really interesting story, some that I believe a lot of women will relate to. And yeah, you can just go ahead and tell us a little bit more about what it is you do and where you've come from.
Thanks, Sarah. Well, thank you for, first of all, inviting me onto your podcast. So in terms of myself and my background, let's split it up into personal and professional life. So I'm first generation Indian. My parents emigrated from India in the late 50s and 60s. They're now both deceased. And I was born and raised in the Midlands. Our parents were hard workers. They weren't very educated. They hadn't gone to university. They were quite young when they emigrated. My father was about 25 and my mother was about 21. But they had this kind of motivation to become better than what they were. So they eventually became self-employed business owners. In my personal life, my childhood before 11 was probably very stable and quite content. But my father began drinking after 11, and I suppose my teens and my adulthood became quite unstable, leading to kind of ostracization in social networks. There was problems with getting married because my father was quite a disciplinarian and quite strict, carried over the kind of views of his kind of childhood when he was in India. And things have already moved on at that time. So we're talking about, well, 59 now. So it was many, many, many years ago. But his drinking also impacted my education. We'll talk about that in a while. I got married. I had a kind of a semi-arranged marriage. I got married quite late for an Indian girl, 30 odd years ago. I was 27. I've got 2 children, but I left my marriage in 2016. Really because of the toxic nature of my husband. And then we can talk about that later. My children and I are quite stable at the moment, very stable actually. So they're stable, they're educated, and they're extremely supportive. So that's where I am in my personal life. And in my professional life, well, I fell into training and development after my degree. And I carried that on until I had children. Of course, when you have kids, your career goes sideways, and it did for me. But I returned to working at 40, which was quite late in the day. And it was because I suppose my husband didn't provide for us the way I wanted him to provide for us. So I went back into the workplace, worked exceptionally hard, and carved out a career as a project program manager, delivering HR system and e-commerce projects around the world. So I did that for 15 years. And then in 2019, I decided that was enough. And I was going to go to Spain to retire. COVID hit, came back to the UK. And then decided once COVID was semi-over that I would actually then move to Bristol. I wanted to leave the toxic people behind. I didn't want any connection with my past. So I moved to Bristol in 2021 and I restarted my company, which is Roaring Ahead. And it's named because my mother used to call me Sher, which is lion in Hindi. and I wanted to honor my mother. And I started that because I had been so disempowered in my own life that I wanted to give something back. I wanted to empower other women, regardless of color, class, creed, and culture. I formed Roaring Ahead. And after that came the You're Not Invisible After 50. And now we have a podcast that is global, and we're into season 2, almost hitting, we're going to move into season 3 very quickly, and it's become quite a success. We're a top 10% shared globally at the moment, and we've got ambition to go further up the scale. I hope that's a great introduction.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so many points there that I think people will relate to, obviously, your family background and some of the challenges that you faced there, but not only that, in your relationship, your personal life, with having children, like you said, it does make a difference. It really does. It's a wonderful thing. I'm a mother as well, and I love having kids, but I certainly felt the impact it had on my career as well. And then not only that, we are seeing a lot more women speak up about ageism in the workplace, and certainly going through certain changes at that age, there's not the right support, there's not enough support for women in their career, or even in business, with some of the challenges that are faced later on in life.
Well, I think Sarah's, since I've kind of dipped my toe in these waters, I've realized that ageism is right across the world. I mean, the West think, oh, it doesn't occur in the East. I'll tell you something, it does. So it's across the board, and you think, okay, so the narrative against women who are over 50 is bigger than what I originally thought it would be. And the podcast really opens the door for women to speak up. It's to spotlight them, it's to showcase them. Things that weren't done for me, I'm doing for others. And I'm showcasing and spotlighting women so that they can then spread their message to other women. So you've got like you've got a duplication of this, you've got a triplication of this, whatever you want to call it. You've got a multiplication of this, whatever degree that is too. And I think that's the exciting thing about all that I'm doing.
Yeah, certainly. And I know that with this podcast, Fearless Female Voices, that's it. It sort of mirrors and echoes what it is you're trying to do as well. So, I always believe that, one voice may be drowned out, but many voices are harder to drown out than one. So if we all share our stories and speak up, then yes, change will happen.
I think I'm of the same kind of mindset, the same thinking. One voice here, one voice there, one person over here, one person over there, doesn't make the difference. When there's many, many voices, and the image is different to what is being portrayed in society today, then you've got a change. Then you've got a movement. Then you've got a power behind it. Yeah. And I think that's what it's all about.
Exactly right. And I think many women will relate to some of the things that you've said, not just women who come from the same background as you, the same family or cultural background, but there are challenges that are shared by women all over the world, as you've mentioned, that are very relatable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned that with your family history, that really impacted some of your choices and your education. Would you say it was in a positive way or a negative way, or did it really steer your choices in a direction that you wanted to go, or do you feel like you've made a bit of a U-turn in life along the way?
I think people have impacted my life. My father's drinking impacted the way that we were seen by society. It impacted my education because at the time when it was my formative years, I got distracted by my education. I had this kind of goal in my head that I was going to become a dentist, have get married to the love of my life and live a very happy ever after life. That was a dream. And none of it happened, which is really sad because I'm a Piscean and a dreamer. So that was what I had in my head. So that steered that. And I got married to a man who I thought was going to be kind of, modern and free thinking, but he was terribly influenced by his family. And that had a huge impact. Now, we're not going to stereotype anyone, because people are people at the end of the day. But, I didn't fit the mold. I didn't do what I was told. I didn't, I moved out of my ex-in-laws home 6 months after I got married to make my own home. And that was it. That kind of was a thing that kind of upset the apple cart. And I was ostracized, and there was hostility and toxicity towards me and my children for 25 years of that one step that I dared to take. And that, it was just a very dark and difficult time in my life. 25 years I put up with it. And then at 52, my son said to me, "Mom, it's time to get out." So that was, that was like, okay, I need to go. And it was going from the known to the unknown. I think that's what's scary to anyone. I was already financially independent, and I'll talk about in a while, but I was already financially independent because something happened around my father's death that actually opened my eyes. And I thought, God, I can't be at the mercy of other people. I need to actually take control of my own life. Thinking that was a modern woman, I was still didn't kind of, have all my headlights on. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't in the driver's seat. I wasn't driving the car at all. And I thought, no, I've got to take control now. And I'm glad I did, because that allowed me to leave at 52. And it was with my son's blessing. It was like, yes, Mom, I think it's time. And we did. So we went from the kind of known to the unknown. And so I had been influenced terribly by people in my life. So, this is only part of my story. And one day I'm going to write that book. So it's going to be an interesting read, I'll tell you that.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, that's maybe something we can talk about, because I shared my story in a book, and it was one of the most cathartic and liberating things that I had ever done. But we're not here to talk about that. So, but just to mention, I recommend it. I think there really truly is power in sharing your story, as I've mentioned, and it's a wonderful thing that you took control and felt empowered yourself, and you're now sharing that empowerment with other women in the world, because it's, as you say, it's hard to move from the known to the unknown, even if it is toxic where you are. Stepping into the unknown is a very frightening thing. And I guess it doesn't matter when you take that step to take control. The important thing is that you take it. But so many people may not want to take that step because it's unknown, and you're leaving that network or that culture that you've had your whole life.
Well, I was asked the question, why leaving this marriage at 52? And my answer to that is, well, are you living my life, right? Do you know what's happening behind closed doors? Do you know what I've been going through? Do you know what I'm feeling? No, you don't. So the only person to make that decision was myself. Now, that's easy. I didn't kind of think, I knew that my marriage wasn't happy, but I stuck with it because of my children. But when my children gave me permission as well, that was kind of a blessing, It was like, yes, Mom. It was like, yeah, you can go, you can leave. We are with you, and my children are with me. And what more do I need to show to the world? That my kids are standing with me and not with my exes. In exes, I mean my one ex-husband and my in-laws. But, they're standing with me. And to me, they know which side, where the power really lay.
Yeah. And I think that's wonderful that that bravery to stand up to everybody. I can't imagine the stress and the heartache that you must have experienced for that length of time. And yet we're so resilient for the sake of your children. That's love. That happens with love. We do that for our children. We do that for our loved ones. I can't imagine the stress and the heartache that you must have felt, and then to be brave like that, to stand up and say no more.
Absolutely. I think, you have to, that wasn't really where the bravery really came in. It came in later as well. But that was the first step. That was the first step to kind of take a deep breath and take a different path. But it wasn't actually until my mother's death when the bravery really kind of, stepped in, because then again, I've had so many people influence me negatively that when my mother died, again, I had a slap in the face. I was stabbed in the back. I was left with almost nothing. And I had to then step up. And then because my mother had called me, Sher, which is lion in Hindi, I knew that I had to come back fighting. I had to honor my mother, and I had to honor her view of what she thought I was all about. And also to be a role model to my children, right? Because I wasn't, even though I was a single mom, I certainly wasn't going to portray to my children that I'm a weak mom, that I'm broken by the people who want to break you. I certainly didn't want to do that. And I certainly don't want to do that. And now they see me in a totally different light. I'm totally in control of my life. And I just love, I must say, I just love the way I came back, and now I feel like I can tell my story, or, parts of it at the moment, but the rest will come out in a book eventually.
Eventually, yes. Well, you need to let us know when that happens, because we'll share it.
Well, thank you very much for that.
Definitely. I think that more women need to hear our voices, our stories around the world, because there are women out there that will be experiencing the same thing as you have. And they may not know what the next step is or how it's going to turn out. And your story is an example of moving from this toxic environment into the unknown. And it was okay. It's okay. It's turned out well for you.
Well, absolutely, Sarah. I think you have to have faith. You have to have the strength. You have to have the resilience. You have to have the perseverance. You have to have the will. And you have to have the fight to kind of come back. And I have. I took one step, and then I took a second step, and then it led to somewhere else. And then, I'm here where I am now. And this is just the beginning of another chapter of my life. And I'm loving this chapter. I've got control of my life. I'm writing my own story now, and not others aren't writing my story.
And that's liberating to know that it's your story now, not someone else's.
Absolutely. I mean, and I've used that word liberating and liberation, and it's like the doors have opened, the windows have opened, and I've got a new life. I can breathe easily, and I feel that. I feel the power within myself to say what I want, think what I want, think the way I want to think, and do what I want. And those are powerful choices, and yeah, I feel totally liberated because I took that step.
Yeah,
that massive step.
Definitely. And so through all this, it's quite it was quite a challenging time. You faced quite a lot of challenges for a long period of time. So that resilience is remarkable. What would you say helped you through these very challenging times the most? What did you draw on to find that strength and resilience to get through this persistent and constant set of challenges?
I think it was, just to be there for my children. I mean, I put up with it because of my kids. I think people put up with a lot because of their children. I couldn't go back to my father because that was a toxic environment. I couldn't go. I had to stay where I was, to be honest. I had to stay where I was because there's nowhere else to go until I became financially independent. And it still took me a few years, but it was my father's death that began the journey of becoming financially independent. I realized then when my father died, what people were truly about, how toxic people could become, what stories they told, the games they played, the narratives, etc. And I just thought, I've got to do something different with my life. I can't let anyone take control of my life. I need to take control. And the only way to take control is to become financially independent, first of all, because you need an exit route. But I still hadn't done that until 2016. So my father died in 2011. So it still took me 5 years. It still took me 5 years to get to the stage that I needed to get to in order to make the move.
Yeah, certainly. And I come from a financial background as well. And I know that in countries across the world, the relationship that women have with finances and the restrictions that have been placed on them through generations is really something that has to change. And change happens slowly, it does. But, as far as women in general being financially independent, of course, we are seeing more of this, but there is still restrictions or a restrictive culture on women in terms of their finances. We see the gender pay gap, we see the pension gap. We see a lot of, even in the UK, women were not allowed to have their own bank account until several decades ago. It was a law. I think there are a lot of changes to happen there, and I'm really glad that we're seeing things such as financial abuse being recognised as a form of domestic abuse. Things like that. So I definitely echo what you say about being financially independent, or at least financially secure in yourself. It is a part of it, and we shouldn't be shy to admit that, yes, our finances are a part of that independence and that control that we need.
Absolutely. I mean, I was controlled in a way because I didn't have my own finances. I thought, oh, a collective, pot would be great. It's a unison. It's us together. That was a load of crap, really. To say another word, but that was a load of crap because it was a way of controlling. And I felt when I needed to get out, I couldn't get out because of that. And I realized then that I had to make a change. And I did. I started I set up my own company. I became a freelance consultant. And as I said before, I carved out a career in project program management and worked up the scale. I worked really hard to a point where then my son could say to me, yeah, it's time to go, Mom.
Yeah. And you mentioned, so you spoke a lot about family and personal life, and it's taking you on this journey through into your business now, where you really are supporting other women. But in your career, did you face similar challenges because of your cultural background, because you were a woman? How did that factor in?
Always. I mean, especially when I was 40 years old and going back into the workplace. I mean, you kind of think of your exit out of that stage, not going back in. And because I started to work on these very high profile projects and lead huge teams and multi-million pound programs, it became quite evident that, a woman of a certain age, a woman of a certain age and a woman of color wasn't going to fit in all environments or with everybody. And there were many instances when I was pulled up, shouted at, ignored, etc. There was a lot of toxic behavior, a lot. Actually, that was a thing that drove me out into 2019. So I was in an organization. I thought, I've had enough now. I used to say to my daughter on the phone, can you get the wine out? Because I used to feel like that, it's been dealing with so many people and different personalities and their behaviors. It wasn't conducive to my own health, and to my well-being and to my mental health. So I thought in 2019, I'm done in this work, in this environment. I couldn't go up as far as, say, just a man could go up in his career. I wouldn't be seen as that. So I knew that I would only reach a certain point. So I thought, right, okay, I'm done. And so in 2019, I left my contracting life, thought I was going to retire. As I said, COVID hit. And of course, that kind of steered me off onto a different path. And my mother died in 2017, and I did set up the company, but I didn't do anything about it. And then in 2021, and when I moved to Bristol, when I took the chance of moving, because COVID was kind of, it was a bit quieter on the horizon about COVID, I decided that I was going to shift. And then that was the time when I actually started my company up again. But yes, in the workplace, it has been toxic. And I was kind of in a way driven out. I'm glad I was driven out now, because now I have total control. I can do what I like, when I like, who I, want to engage with. I'm carving out my own destiny, which is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of people saying that the glass ceiling no longer exists, that the gap is closing. And yes, change is happening. but that glass ceiling still exists, and it can be there for many reasons, be it age, be it women with children, disabilities, various cultural backgrounds, traditions in the culture that can block, um, you know, whatever it takes to get to that next part, that shatter that ceiling. It very much does exist.
Absolutely. I think, people need to raise their voices. People need to change their attitudes. More people need to be speaking out. And it isn't said and done, right? And I think if you do that more and more, like we are doing, then that becomes the norm. Now, when the norm is the norm, then people have got less to fight against. And I think it's getting to that place of normality that, color isn't an issue, other prejudices aren't an issue, etc., etc. I think need to get to that point, but this can only happen when more people stand up and speak for themselves. And people do. People need to, because that's the only way you can change attitudes.
Yep, exactly, exactly. But then some people may be faced with some of the challenges like yourself, where you were actually shouted at, and I mean, that's intimidation, isn't it? To be shouted at for speaking out and silenced. So, and I've experienced it as well in my job. I would speak out and ignored, basically, just brushed off, just okay, yeah, we'll come back to you on that, or okay, I understand, nice question, not really given an answer, or not really had a chance to discuss. But I've never experienced being shouted at. That seems like it was very out of line, and it's a way of silencing people trying to make change.
It's a power game. That's what it is. It's I'm more powerful than you, and I'm going to put you in your place. Your place is over there, down there, where you aren't seen. And I've had it, had that throughout my career. In the 15 years that I was working, I didn't see so much of it when I was much younger. I saw it when I was a bit older, and and also maybe because of the role that I'd got at that time, becoming a program manager. Where you're much more visible, and you're creating change, and you're taking decisions, etc. And people don't like that. Maybe they don't like it because you're a woman of color, or you're a woman, or you're a woman of a certain age, whatever the reason may be. They did not like it. Women against women, men against women. That was the games that people played, and it was a power game. And now I feel, thanks to all the podcasts that I'm doing, plus my own, that I can say, and I can I'm not naming them, but I'm shaming their behaviors. And I think more people who speak up about people's behaviors, there might be less of it in the workplace in the future, right? Because I think, oh, we can't get away. For example, there was an article this week about whistleblowing, and that whistleblowing should be done. But if people should be brave enough to stand up and speak out about their own rights, or where they see wrongs. And I think that's when you get, again, as I'm saying, Sarah, that's what you said earlier, you get the change. And until people start doing that, people are going to be shouted at. People are going to be silenced. People are going to be brushed away. And that's not what you don't want this behavior to happen 20 years down the road. Not at all. You want to change people's behavior now, so the next generation coming up don't have that.
Yep, exactly. Nobody has a right. Nobody has an innate right to oppress another person.
Yeah.
They don't. We're all human. And this is why I really love that we're seeing a lot of conversations around about purpose in business, and being purpose driven, believing in the purpose and the problems that you solve, and the people, because a business or an organization is nothing without its people. So if you have executives and decision makers treating their people like you've been treated, your talent leaves the workforce, as you've gone and set up your own business to support other women, and it's been great for you. They've lost a very talented person from the workforce. When you think about it from a business perspective, that's not good. And all that had to be done was a change in attitude, a changing workplace culture, and to allow people to speak out without repercussion, without intimidation, without that fear of being penalized or punished. It's
Totally agree with you on that one, because if the behaviors were different, then, you'd achieve a lot more. I mean, losing talent in the workplace is a costly business.
Mhm.
Come on, you're going to have to replace that individual. You're not even sure the next person that's coming along is going to be as talented or as gifted or as able or as, hardworking, whatever. You're taking a chance on that person. But also the underlying behavior has to change, because you can't, get rid of people time after time after time, right? So that behavior has to change. But yes, once the talent's gone, as I said, it's a costly business, and it shouldn't be allowed. People should be treated with respect and dignity. And that's what we should all be aiming for.
Exactly. And I think that's, key words right there, respect and dignity. I mean, where's the issue to just treat another human being with respect and dignity? That is someone else's daughter or son.
Mhm,
That is
mhm.
another person's child. That is another person's mother or father, child. It's it doesn't take much, does it, to
No,
just
it
be
doesn't. I mean,
respectful of each other?
absolutely, Sarah. I mean, it's interesting what you just said, because on a different podcast, we're talking about, the ageist attitude towards women over 50. And I said to the person who's interviewing, and not attacking him, but just saying, if someone said that about your mother, would you accept it? Would you say it of your own mother? No, you wouldn't. So what makes you have the right to say it about somebody else's mother, sister, auntie, whatever relationship, right? What gives you the right? And hence, you need to respect people for who they are. And through this podcast that I'm doing, and probably the same for you, you see such talented people, such talent is around. And in my podcast, You're Not Invisible After 50, there are so many women who are over 50 who are doing amazing work, and, you go, oh, somebody 70, somebody 65, somebody 55, 59. It's just phenomenal. And that's what we're trying to bring to the forefront, is like, here you go, world, you're not past your prime at 50. I'm 59. Come on. I'm 59 and I'm proud of it. And I would have never thought that a nearly 60-year-old woman would be the way I behave today, right? I've got the energy, I've got the enthusiasm, I'm very creative, I'm forward thinking, I've got all those kind of attributes that I had when I was younger.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing. And, you mentioned about that person on your podcast, would you speak to your mother that way? I would just ask anybody to be um, compassionate. That's just compassion. Be compassionate of that person that you are addressing and speaking to. I definitely think there's a place in the world to lead with compassion, to be compassionate as a leader. I don't think that compassion should be seen as a weakness. It definitely is not. I think that there's a lot of change and a lot of power that can come through compassion, because you then start to respect the other person. You then treat them with dignity. You listen better, and you treat people better overall. And I don't think either that at the age of 50 or over, you're any less valuable than someone who is in their 40s, 30s, 20s. In fact, you've gone through your whole uh, life experience. You have all this wisdom, all this experience, these skill sets to share. And again, I think being pushed out of the workforce or out of your career at that age it's a loss to the workforce, the employer, the business. It is that you lose all that talent, skill, wisdom, experience, just walks out the door with you.
Well, I think, it's a loss to them as a gain to me, right? Because I'm actually deploying all the things that I've learned being in those workplaces, in my own business. How do I run a business? How do I, all about strategy and marketing, etc. I'm utilizing those skills I had there in my own environment, in my own space. Yes, it's a loss for them. Yes, they may get someone, great, good for them. But the end of the day, it's a gain for me. Now, not everybody can set up their own business. Not everybody wants to set up their own business. And some people might just give up. And that's a shame, because they shouldn't be giving up. They should, muster the strength and courage to think about what they could do differently if they want to do something differently. It's a choice. Everything is a choice. I chose to, restart my business. I chose to do a podcast. had no experience in it, but I chose to do it. I'm always pushing. For me personally, I've always pushed the boundaries. I've always thought outside the box, and I'm always looking for the next thing. And so for me, it kind of worked. But yeah, it is a shame, and you're right, Sarah, compassion, it isn't a weakness. Kindness isn't a weakness. Those are core human traits that we should be proud of and display openly with bravery and courage, and people don't. They think, oh, this person's weak. I'm certainly not weak, right? And I want to display compassion because it's wasn't displayed or shown to me. And I want to ensure that whoever I come across, I leave a positive impression, the best that I can. You don't want to get on with everybody in the world, and people may not like you. Fine, that's their opinion. But the fact is, if you can go to sleep at night knowing that you haven't hurt another human being, it's a good place to be.
But even if you show that compassion and kindness to one human being and it makes a difference in their life, isn't it all worth it? Even if it makes a difference to
Absolutely.
one person, it is worth it, because if we all made a positive change to one person, imagine what we could do. Imagine that the positivity that would be in the world if we all did that.
Absolutely. And as leaders, as being in the forefront of your business, this is the example you need to be setting. You need to have a purpose in your business. You need to have compassion. You need to have kindness in your heart, and then if you drive that, people can relate to that because they know where you're coming from. I was on a different podcast about honesty, integrity, the core traits to how I live my life now. And I go, that's the way I operate, because there's nothing else. There's no one, there's so much crap in the world. Come on, you get tired of it and you want to bring something that's honest and refreshing and a change and something that people go, oh, I like that. I like the sound of that. And I think if you can even, as you said, Sarah, change one person's life, make a difference to one person, it's the greatest gift that you can give and also receive back.
Especially when you think about it, that, if you can give that to one other person, knowing that at one point in your life, you needed that, having experienced challenges and such hard times, and thinking that you wish someone had done that for you, being able to give that to another person, it's empowering, isn't it? It's wonderful.
Well, it's really interesting what you just said, because I've never had it given to me. In my father was very much anti me because I was different. My in-laws were anti me because I was different. My close family, apart from my children, were anti me because I was different. And they used that against me. So I wasn't displayed those characteristics. But that doesn't mean that you become bitter and entrenched in all of that toxic nature. You actually then, I had time to reflect a lot after my mother's death. And I thought, that's not how I'm going to be. It's not how I'm going to operate. It's not what I want to be. I don't want to go to my deathbed and think back and think I was a shitty person. I want to go to my deathbed thinking, yeah, I did the best I could. And whatever life I have left in me, that's how I want to be seen. For myself, for my children, and then for the house, for the world itself. And that's my motivation. When people do crap, doesn't mean that you've got to be crappy too. When people have, I have suffered so much in my life in terms of emotional abuse and the toxic nature of individuals. As I said, my book's going to be an interesting reading, right? But that, doesn't mean that I need to be bittered by it.
No.
I have now come out of that and want to be more positive in my life and display that positivity for others.
Yep, definitely. And you made a choice. And that, women have been fighting for so long to have their own choices, to make their own choices. And even if there doesn't seem like there's one there always is something. It may not be the choices that you like, but there's still a choice. And you were faced with many challenges, possibly many choices that you really didn't like, but you chose to be a certain way. You chose to be kind rather than bitter. You chose to help people rather than to, shut yourself away and, you know, hide away from that.
Or
Those are
wither
big
away and
choices.
die would be the
Yeah,
other option.
yeah.
I mean, I was described as somebody who was angry, who was toxic, who didn't know what they were talking about. I wouldn't describe myself, or my kids wouldn't describe me as that either. They wouldn't describe me as that person
You certainly
because,
don't seem like it to me.
well, I just am who I am. And, it's because of other people's narratives and other people's behaviors. If someone kicks a dog, it's going to bark, right? And, it was, you said about resilience. I was resilient, but I was also very much hurt. And, anger comes out of that.
Yeah.
But now that I'm in my own space, I feel so much in control that I don't recognize the person that was there. I recognize this person now. And I'm proud of the person I've become, because I can be my true self. And I wasn't allowed to be my true self because all the narratives and all the stories that were told and the lies and all of this, all of that, having my voice now on my podcast, in my book, or any talk I do, or other people's podcasts, at least I can now say what the truth is or what the truth was. I've got my voice back. So that to me is powerful, because now this is me saying how it was for me and how I came out of it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think it's also important, something you mentioned there, that, although you were resilient, you were hurt. Being strong and being brave and courageous doesn't mean that you're not hurt, or, you don't have feelings, or that you hide those feelings. You're not, emotional about these things. Experiencing these hardships, it's hurtful. And, you experience betrayal, that's deep. And it's, you can be strong and courageous and resilient and still be hurt, still need help, still need to talk to people and feel emotions. It doesn't mean that you're, weak or not strong enough. I think it's important to point out to anyone listening that you can be strong and still feel hurt and still need help and still need support.
I'm a total, you wouldn't probably leave this, but I'm a total empath, and I feel pain a lot. And my children always say to me when I go on talks or when I talk on a podcast, please do not cry, because the hurt is still with me. It's in my soul. It's what I carry every day of why I'm happy where I am. I admit that now, but the journey to get here has been long and hard, and it's been painful. And I carry that hurt still inside me. It's still raw, because what people did, they shouldn't have done. And I shouldn't have suffered, or my children shouldn't have suffered for it. In fact, I'll be honest with you, Sarah, yesterday I said to my daughter, because we were talking about me being here, and I said to my daughter, I'm sorry. And she said to me, Mom, you don't have to be sorry for anything, because it wasn't your doing. You did the best. You were the shield. You got it aimed at you, but not, you tried to protect us. And to me, I carry that hurt. Even today, I carry that hurt. But again, I will not allow that to overtake me, but I carry it in my heart. And at times I do, my voice vibrates, there's that vibration of like emotion, because I mean, I could burst out crying if I wanted to, but I'm not going to, because I'm more professional than that. But it doesn't mean I don't carry that hurt. It's still there, and it's always going to be raw, because as you said, Sarah, I was betrayed. I was hurt, I was lied to. I was made a fool of, people told lies about me. This is my story now, and I'm going to tell it my way.
Yep, yep. And you will reach others who are experiencing the same thing, and hopefully help many, not just one person, but many. And that will be a legacy to help others in that same situation, you know.
And also, you said about legacy, because this is all about a legacy. It's a legacy for my mother. It's a legacy for my children. It's to make where I wasn't seen, heard, ignored. I wasn't visible. I wasn't visible at all. But this is my legacy as well. This is what I'm leaving behind on the planet when I go. And my kids are going to take over my company when I do die. They're already become directors, because I want his legacy for my mother, who really kind of started the whole journey, for my children, because I owe it to them and to myself, and then of course to the world. And you think, okay, I'm doing this for a real, not a kind of personal, greedy, self, kind of absorbed kind of idea. It's more about, what can I do for the world before I leave the planet? And that's what it's all about.
Yeah, definitely. And I hear so many women who go into business, or even in their career, say that, that we, it's, this comes back to this weakness again. Actually, we want to leave the world a better place than what we found it. And if we do have children, we want to leave the world a better place for them. But generally women are seen as caring and compassionate, and that's seen as a weakness. And it shouldn't be, because we have this drive to make things better. We want to make things better for our families, for our children, for the world. It's not a weakness. And I've had someone speak to me about I remember speaking to someone about maybe a business partnership, and I think I was a little bit irked by the fact that this person told me, oh, women come from a very caring, compassionate place in business, but it's not quite how business is done. And I thought, I- no,
And that's why the
I
world
can't
is such
agree
a
with that.
mess.
I can't agree with that. It definitely is how business should be done. It's how we should live our lives as humans. It's how we should treat one another with caring and compassion. It's not a weakness, because we find our drive there. When we care about something, we find our drive there, and we find our purpose there.
If more women rule the world, we'd be in a different world, right?
Yeah.
So I think patriarchy hasn't helped. And I think it's time for women to rise up and speak out, and regardless of your age, regardless of who you are, all women's voices count. I'm not saying men should be shoved aside, but it should be the fact that women should be heard and seen, because we can bring a different dimension to the business world, to the art world, to any environment, to any industry. And I just don't think that women should be seen as a weakness. They should be seen as a strength. They should be seen for their strengths and what they can bring to any environment. And people just have these blinkers on, a woman, a woman of color, a woman of a certain age, it's not happening. Just think, no. People are people. And, I have more energy today than I did when I was in my 40s or even in my late 30s. I was in a very depressive state because of all what's going around me. Now, today, I'm nearly 60. I box, I do Pilates, I run my own business, I do a podcast, it's like, this gives me the energy and the oomph to carry on and to drive this forward and be an example to other women that, when I was young, no one told me what 50 looked like, or 60, my parents didn't tell me. But when you get there, you say, okay, so this is me, this is how I think, and this is how I want to be seen. And if you show yourself up as that, other people will see it. My kids now absolutely love the fact, the energy that I have. They love the fact that I'm controlling my own life. They love the fact I'm running my own company. And that is empowering to myself, but it's also empowering to them and to anybody who comes across, I suppose, any of us, really.
Definitely. And I think it's so important to set the right example for young women who, and young men actually, to see how young women should be treated. The next generation are going to be the people that we hand over the torch to continue the change, to continue the movement. And I do believe that setting that example is so important for the next generation, and to be a good role model. It's the only way that we're going to continue to improve our culture, to improve our world, improve our society, is if we think about the next generation and the example that we're setting for them.
I think that's really powerful, because it is, because if we don't set an example for the next generation, what have they got to look forward to, right? If we don't change things, even in a little small way. I said to my children, me doing this business, I'm not going to live to the end to see the change come. May happen, may not happen, whatever it may be. But I've taken the decision that they will carry this on, right? So they will become directors and they will carry this torch on, because it's for the next generation. It's for them. It's for other people like them. It's for, anybody who's younger than them coming up in the world. If you see a change occurring and you see the effort in making that change and continuing that change, then at some point, God willing, the change will happen, right? So I think it is about the next generation. We can't be selfish. It's just about us. It's about what's coming up next, who's coming up next. And even if that person is like 2 years younger than you and they go, oh, 50, and when they see or hear, someone on a podcast or see somebody on a podcast or running their company or doing XYZ, they'll go, oh, so 50 isn't really what I thought 50 is going to be like, right? 50 is, very different to what I thought 50 is going to be like. And that's exactly what you're trying to portray and show and change.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's the age of information, and we need to share that knowledge, share that information, make sure that people have, the right information to make informed decisions, and to know what's coming next almost, not take away that unknown, to teach them, teach them that lesson to carry with them all through life. There's so many lessons in the stories that we share with each other.
And I think that's really valuable, because stories get told. Stories get lost by people who are older. Their knowledge, their experience, their talent is pushed aside. But those need to be honored and respected and recorded, like we are trying to do. We're recording people's voices and also their stories. And on my podcast, it's tips. What tips can you give? I mean, we always listen to our parents. So they're always giving you lessons of life. My kids hear it all the time, right? And but you got these, and these help whoever listens to them, because we're just giving what we have learned. And if you know what's coming next, or even if you learn and you can change your behavior at that point in time, and you shift your behavior, you're doing somebody a world of good. And I think that again is very powerful.
Exactly. So on that note, what would you say, can you share a mistake that you've made? I know that there's we all make mistakes, but there's always a lesson to making that mistake, and some people are afraid to take action because of that fear of making a mistake, or fear of failure. What would you say? Can you give an example of a mistake that you've made that you learned a very valuable lesson from, looking back?
I think my mistake, Sarah, to be honest, was I didn't realize my worth. Because I was drowned out. I was not seen. I was ignored. I was kind of like lost the energy. I just lost the game. I just wasn't in it for the fight. And I lost who I was, and I didn't recognize my worth. That was my mistake. We'll never allow that to happen again. And I think that's what I learned, was everybody is worthy. And that's a real strong message to put out there. Everybody is worthy.
Definitely. Absolutely. Like, yes. Everyone is worthy. Everyone is deserving of a good life. Yeah.
And to be respected and have compassion, all the things that we've talked about.
Exactly.
Right?
Everyone deserves dignity. Everyone deserves that respect. No one person has a right to oppress another person and teach them or treat them badly. It's just wrong. We would have a much better world if we all changed that. So what do you think would be a good piece of advice for women facing the same hardships and challenges as you've gone through, be it 50 or over, a young person, a young woman? What would be your advice to someone who is maybe going through the same experience that you've had?
Okay, I'm going to say it in the form of a poem that I wrote myself, because I'm a poet as well.
Okay.
And I read it on live on air on BBC Bristol, and it's called "Let Us Stop Seeing Ourselves Through the Eyes of People Who Never Saw Us." So let us stop seeing ourselves through the eyes of people who never saw us, understood us, or got us, who didn't care if we lived or died, survived or thrived, who didn't stretch a helping hand when we began to drown, who pushed us down when we wanted to rise, who thought they knew us when they never had a clue, whose misconceptions misconstrued their thoughts and actions, their misbeliefs leading to ripples in our tranquil lives, disturbing the ebb and flow until we took control and saw ourselves in a different light. We saw ourselves more than what we were told. We are worth more than what we think. Our uniqueness, our individuality is ours alone and stands out in this world of copycats. Let us stop seeing ourselves through the eyes of people who never saw us, because they never had the foresight to see what was good.
That's amazing. That really is wonderful. It's such a strong message to send to people. And I hope anyone listening to this, it really touches their heart and lets them know that they are worth more than the experience that they're having.
Absolutely. And it's about raising yourself up. It's raising your voice. It's about being brave, strong, and becoming empowered. And it's being visible and roaring. Really, it's about all of that.
Excellent. Oh, wonderful. I think we've covered so many powerful messages, and I hope that it reaches so many people that are having a hard time, that think they're alone, and that think that their voice doesn't matter, because it's not true. Your voice does matter, your story matters. And as we've, concluded with, you're worth more than what you're going through. You're worth more than what people think of you. That comes from within.
Absolutely. I mean, all of it and everything. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Brilliant.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the Fearless Female Voices show and podcast. You've been an absolutely amazing guest. Perhaps we can get you on again sometime to speak more and to catch up and to hear about how you're thriving. It's great to hear that you're thriving. I'd love to catch up again sometime and share even more of your story. But yeah, thank you so much for being a part of the Fearless Female Voices.
Oh, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me and allowing me to say what I've said. So, giving that space. And I always take it up, I always take that space up.
And I think more women need to, and I really hope that more women come on our podcast and share their story and definitely share, follow, share with your women that anyone that you think would benefit from listening to our stories. Thank you.
Thank you.